So we can probably get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for enduring our kind of slight moment of chaos as we settle into, well, it's kind of, the self-referring phenomenon of life right now.
Mm,
I'm Sarah Wilson. I have a Substack called This Is Precious, and I write about, well, I think we write about similar things, don't we, Doug Rushkoff? So, Doug, and we end up on the same podcasts. I interviewed you about 3 years ago about the billionaire bunkers, the
right.
the billionaire mindset, as well as a thesis that you brought up, which I just remembered when I was kind of logging on today. You referred to the the dreams or the ideas of going to Mars um, as a basically a dismissal of fear of the feminine, which I found really
Mm,
interesting. And I'll put a link to that conversation because it was one of my favorite wild conversations. I'll put that
mm.
in the notes at the bottom of this Substack thing later on. But Doug, do you want to introduce yourself, who you are and what you write about and where you're at?
Yeah, I'm Douglas Rushkoff. I'm an author mostly. I started writing here. See, I wrote all these books. I, I started writing in the early '90s, optimistically about uh, uh, technology and hypertext and fractals and psychedelia and how all these things seem to be happening at the same time. I kind of called it this movement. I called Cyberia, Cyberia. Everything
Yeah.
from fantasy role playing to quantum physics. That we had the possibility to move into a much more of a designer reality. That we were coming to see that the world we live in is not a lot of the things we accept as given conditions of nature are arbitrary. They're things, models made by people, and we can remake them in new ways. And the computers and networking seem like a great metaphor for the way that we can sort of reprogram the world we're in. And then I watched as capitalism came in and turn these technologies from tools for people to do cool things together to tools we can use on people to make them better consumers, and been sort of kvetching about that ever since.
Mm.
And now I'm my most recent shift over the last 2 or 3 years is kind of from what I was calling an agent of change, kind of an activist, to more of an agent of care,
Yes.
where I'm more about now how can we metabolize this moment together rather than keep wriggling, trying to change. The ideas that we have so easily become kind of figures on the screen or words rather than the processes and ways we engage with each other.
You've been doing the Team Human project for quite a long time. I think Team Human sums up, things in
Yeah.
10 years or so. And even the book that what was the name of that book again? It sold really well. And I think about
Well,
the
the
bill.
first one was Team Human. That's what it was called,
Oh, okay.
um, which was a great thing. Um,
But the
and
their bunkers one. Just
Yeah, that's Survival of the Richest,
that,
Escape Fantasies of the Tech Billionaires. And it's interesting, both books in some ways were responses to this same tech bro tendency to want to escape this reality and level up into some meta reality. And I kind of
yep.
traced it all the way back to Francis Bacon and the founding of science as this abstraction on nature. But it was all about ideas. And I felt like, well, with these books, I can kind of convince people not to go there, not to do that.
Yeah.
And now people, they did go there,
We're, we're-
the
yeah. I think you said we're soaked in. We are.
soaking in it. Yeah, we're soaking in it.
Yeah, yeah, we're soaking in it. And, I've gone on a similar trajectory. And I think you and I were both at a sort of similar stage of we can fight this, right? Like, we don't have to go. And we were trying to expose what these tech bros were doing so that people would like refer to their humanity and go, no, fuck this. I am not going to go there, right? But I think in the last couple of years, I've had to do a real kind of settling into the idea that everything that we were talking about has come about. We're soaking in it. Now what? And it's interesting. You've done a sort of a wonderful full circle. And usually with these lives, I pick up on a post that somebody has written on Substack that really, really intrigued me, excited me, or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Two posts recently. A couple of months ago it was. It's taken me a while to get this live going for all kinds of
Mhm.
reasons. But The Joy of Becoming Worthless, which was a sort of a follow-up to a post that you wrote about called Intentional Collapse, where you picked up on the idea, kind of you extended the Naomi Klein idea of disaster capitalism, that, the rich bros swoop on in when there's a disaster and make money from it. You're actually going one step further and saying, well, actually, they're intentionally creating the meta disaster that we're in so that they can then not just kind of capitalize in a hey, let's just kind of get on with capitalism format. It's like, this is the whole point, right? And the Joy of Becoming Worthless, you drill down. I'm sort of putting words into your mouth, but I kind of like paraphrasing it so I can remember what it was about, because it was wonderful. And I was writing about similar things at the same time. But your argument was that these tech bros are intentionally collapsing the economy so they can swoop in, buy up the assets from the mum and dad investors, particularly property, and so on. And where do we sit? All right, universal basic income, that's never going to happen. But okay, they don't care. We're going to become worthless because they actually don't need us to be consumers anymore, because the AI that they're building will be both their producers and consumers. And so humans are going to be cast out. And you swing this around to being something that's actually kind of good for Team Human, because it takes us back to a way of being outside of that whole matrix. Do you want to add to that? Because I've probably paraphrased it slightly. Slightly different.
Yeah. I mean, I hope people can keep up. I mean, I knew what you were saying, but there's a lot of I find when I make these arguments in the world, people get stuck on some of the points, but yeah, so we know disaster capitalism. And then really what I was looking at was really the way the US government was doing tariffs and doing all these things that were putting, say, farmers out of business and forcing them to sell their land. And then seeing, oh, well, look, some of the people in Trump's government are the people who own the private investment funds that are buying farmland from the farmers who are being bankrupted by the very policies that they're creating. And I'm like, maybe that's a little bit more than opportunistic, especially if they're arguing for those policies. So I started to realize that what they're doing is something like what happened accidentally in the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union crashed, all of these public assets got, they were kind of worthless in a way. They couldn't support themselves. So the oligarchs bought up all the things, that we would think of as public, like, roads and utilities and all that. And then I thought, oh, I get it. What they'll do is create tariffs so that a port will go out of business and then sell that port to a Saudi wealth fund or to a venture firm, so that then all of these public assets are bought cheap by private entities.
Mm.
So they could be owned. So I was looking at that and then thinking that what they were trying to do was turn us into a country like Qatar or Saudi Arabia, which they're called resource curse countries because they have a really valuable resource like oil, but the emirs take all the money and then they don't need an educated population because you just drill my oil and get out of my face. So you just need a commodity. And the commodity that they're going to have is data. The commodity is us. The commodity is that. So you build up AI companies the way a Middle Eastern country might build up oil rigs, and then you've got a commodity, and then you don't need us. Which then got me to the second article, which was, well, don't they need us to use the AI? They don't need us to use the AI. Because the new marketplace really is if you're an oligarch, if you're a billionaire, you're not engaged with the human consumers and producers. You just need them to have economic activity so you can compete for it. So now you'll have AIs that they need processing power, they need energy, they need data. Right. So you have a company that's selling them the data they need to do the tasks that they need for the other companies, then it's the same thing. Think of it like owning a shopping mall where there's a Jamba Juice and a Starbucks, and you own the one Starbucks and you have those employees, and the Jamba Juice guys got the Jamba Juice employees, and they buy back and forth from each other, and that's it. That's sort of that AI universe. And it leaves us it leaves us behind. And the behind that they're afraid of, that they think is going to happen, is that we're going to live in this Mad Max desolate universe competing for the scraps. And I'm kind of thinking, what if we prepare for that? What if we build mutual aid and friendships and stuff so that when they go into their virtual AI world, we can take over the real world?
Yeah. And you use some examples that I think are really interesting. You actually reference medieval Europe somewhere along the lines, and the whole
Mm,
idea of employment that was brought in back then. So there is an example there. Do you want to talk through that? Because I actually found that really interesting. Sort of the fact that we humans used to work 3 days a week. We actually got to a point where it's quite in a similar sort of way. The pyramid format collapsed, and that we went to a sort of a horizontal civilization. Do you want to talk through that?
exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's like pyramidal civilizations and horizontal civilizations, and pyramidal ones like feudal